This is explaining why you haven't heard of my research and why only a few of the very, very top academics in the world understand and like what I'm doing. In second term freshman year at MIT, I scored 55 points above class average in my three toughest courses. And the competitive male status component in my mental life disappeared from that moment onward. I had gone to the toughest college in the world and on average was 55 points smarter than they were, the students there were. And that sort of finished it. In my own mind, I just couldn't get interested in competing with those unfortunately slow-minded MIT students. I knew that some of them would, by dedication, were going to go far past me and win Nobel Prizes in science and things like that. But I had bigger fish to fry, and I wanted to uh, start turning my life toward the bigger fish. Uh, I guess also there was a wonderful, almost divine sense that uh, I could really do something historic in my era in a sense that still hasn't come to fruition yet. Uh, and that's what I want to explain here in this very short video. Um, I've aimed my research, and it took me years, I mean decades, two decades to figure out what I'm interested in researching. Um, and I did so much research as part of my ordinary life, it took me decades to realize that I had already been researching according to methods and research books for decades by the time I went to a PhD program and saw what research methods were. Um, so getting the whole picture coherent has been something this work in China has really catalyzed me doing. And these videos are really coming after my work in China has gotten my whole view of everything I've been doing better organized than fundamentally than it's ever been before. So let's look at about 8 or 9 things that constitute my research that explain everything about it. They explain its popularity, they explain its unpopularity, they explain why it's not popular with Carnegie Mellon professors, but very popular with the best MIT and then the Harvard and Stanford professors. Average Harvard and MIT professors have a hard time understanding it, but the top guys like it. The very top guys at University of Chicago loved it, said it was a work of genius. So here we go. Number one, in MIT, my sophomore year, write a 250-page book on new intellectual tools that are designed to solve all the problems that Herbert Simon wrote about in Sciences of the Artificial about people and profession and professionals being too narrow for the problems we face. And colleges and all their courses and degree programs being too narrow for the kind of people we really need to be making. And God knows psychopath MBAs covering greeds with economics they learned from Jensen at Harvard. That's really a low, scummy quality of elite that we've been outputting for several decades in the United States, and quite embarrassing to be associated with in terms of nationality. And their performance has been absolutely horrible. So tools to not become like them. Number two, define the good empirically rather than religiously, politically, ideologically. And I already dealt with that in several other videos by the 8,000 people and 41 nations and 63 professions that me and my MBAs interviewed over 7 years while I was at the University of Chicago doing the excellent science research project there. Excellence was the very first thing I was interested in formally researching after I learned what a research method was. But it wasn't the first thing I researched. I'd been researching for years and never knew I was, because I never had a PhD when I was doing it and didn't know it was hard stuff. I thought it was just ordinary life. Number three, replace incompetent ancient interfaces like prose and meetings and discussions. And I've got other videos on that. Number four, invent new forms of education by combining all the stuff that I've already mentioned and that I will mention below. But I mean, actually create new kinds of colleges, new kinds of courses, new kinds of readings, new kinds of publishing, new kinds of experimentation, new kinds of data, new kinds of careers. Uh, and I'm not talking about the Harvard guys rewording Japanese techniques by putting the word lean in instead of Japan, or putting a balanced scorecard in uh, as a substitute for Japanese human capital management. Number five, correct the narrownesses of research and professions and practices in companies via new intellectual, new social tools that get you comprehensive, get you filled with variety, and get you detailed all at the same time, with more comprehensiveness, more variety, and more detail than anybody at Harvard, MIT, Stanford deals with or can handle. Um, extend science to handle ineffable things like design science, science of the arts, culture science, engagement science. Uh, Treat scientifically all the things that men avoid because they would rather hide greeds and psychopathology behind economics equations, silly arithmetic though they be, and hide fear of emotions and fear of social life as engineers do behind second order differential equation models, which again, neither of them are math. MBA programs have no math at all. And God knows that engineers learn no math at all in college. I learned all that math in elementary school and it does not impress me. Real math begins with a course called analysis of real numbers and quickly moves into topology as a doorway to new kinds of spaces, group theory, and all that stuff. Extend science to handle the inevitables. Now make sciences more developmental, and that is add a natural selection of concepts, ideas, people, subschools, information to those dynamics. Add natural selection, evolution dynamics within and among fields to all of these new sciences you develop, including natural selection dynamics in the applied practice areas of how technologies evolve, how devices evolve, users evolve, cultures of use evolve, etc. Check the power of check power and evil. The neurotic blind spots, the hiding of greed and psychopathology in Harvard behind its brand name, and in the MBAs it creates, who just use all of their knowledge for their own personal benefit at the cost of the world. In spite of exceptional people there that do some nice things, as salt and pepper over this giant pie of greed that just stole $13 trillion from every living human being on the planet in 2008 and got away with it because of their political power. But check that kind of power and evil. Check the hobby wars of the United States, run and designed by Harvard people, Stanford people, MIT people. Just a little bit too casual about who cares whether Iraqis die or Guatemalans die or Santo Dominicans die or Afghanistanis die. Who cares if these foreigners die? That kind of arrogance that's within the American elites. And then tools for culture. Everybody talks about culture. Everybody models culture. Nobody does anything much. Nobody builds it. Nobody makes it stronger. Nobody fuses them well. Nobody makes new cultures of their own design that work, actually, that are humane. We badly need, and we're trying to be global without tools for handling culture. It's ridiculous. And to graduate an engineer who can't handle culture or an MBA who can't handle culture is just a farce, an ugly, evil farce. Anyway, that's some of the areas I've directed my research at. Inventing intellectual tools 45 years ago, and everything I've done is use those tools. Founding what I want to research on, finding out what the good is, what excellence is in my time, defining that empirically rather than ideologically or religiously or traditionally. Replacing incompetent ancient interfaces like prose or meetings or discussions. Doing everything that I do with new interfaces that I've developed. Creating new forms of education. Knowledge epitome is what I call it, where I use events instead of courses. I have readings where you diagram all the 200 main points in a chapter. I have many different diagrams you can build of those points. I have regularizations of those points into fractal models. Then correct the narrownesses of research and professionals and practices via new tools, social and intellectual. Extend science to handle ineffable things, emotional things that men avoid, and then make sciences more developmental. Both new sciences more developmental and make old sciences more developmental by getting serious about what real natural selection dynamics are, and it's not optimizing of fitness in any direct way. And then check power and evil. Develop tools to check power with countervailing power and to check evil with naming names and creating a competitor for the evil that Harvard and the elites in the United States and other Western countries and Eastern countries do. And then tools for handling culture. Put culture tools into systems engineering. Put culture tools into ordinary engineering and device design. Put culture tools into MBA programs. Put culture tools into public administration programs. Put them into art and design programs so they don't turn out to be poor wimps all of their life. Get people to admit the role that culture plays in surprising and frustrating and powerfully handling everything. And even though it's emotive, and even though it's social, and even though men don't like it and hate it, they got to master it because it's so much of reality. And if they don't, they just become toys of culture and do things like 10 years of losing money at Euro Disney or Lincoln Electric, setting up factories all over Europe and finding they're illegal because piecework pay, which is a natural in the American culture, turns out to be against the law in most European countries. Little mistakes like that. Not to mention hobby wars by the elites in the United States because they just can't really imagine that it matters all that much how many of the enemy die because they're the enemy, right? Little boy games where the enemy is something where you stop thinking. When that word occurs, you don't need to empathize or care.